Hiring Happenings is the new podcast from Recruiting Gym, bringing you hiring news every month with a pestle twist.
Sponsored by Monster.
Hello and welcome to the first edition of Hiring Happenings, brought to you every month with a pestle twist. So we will explain what pestle is. I'm Angela Cripps, the MD of the Recruiting Gym. I have two fantastic guests with me this morning. Shoesmith of the REC and Webb of Firefish. Now, this podcast wouldn't be happening if we didn't have the sponsorship of Monster. Now, Monster have been connecting job seekers and recruiters online since 1994. It's their 30th anniversary. So thank you to them as well. I'll get you to do a short introduction as to why politics was something that you were interested in, because we've got the P for pestle to kick us off. And we're going to start the first 6 months with a UK flavour. The second 6 months of 2024, we'll be looking at global. We talk about politics and we end up talking about pretty much every other topic as well. So from the pestle, the environmental, the economic, the sociological, the technological, the legislative, it all comes back to politics because politics governs everything, doesn't it? So I'm glad it is a pestle and it's a P at the beginning because we need to get into the politics. And what better person to do it than the person that lobbies the government on our behalf in the UK? So Kate, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do and how it relates to politics.
So Recruitment and Employment Confederation, we're the UK professional body for the recruitment industry. And we're called upon by government all the time to explain what's happening in the jobs market. So we produce a number of data sets that look at hiring intentions. So Jobs Outlook, it interviews the clients and says, what are you planning to do in terms of short and mid-term thinking around permanent and temp headcounts. We do the report on jobs, which is the thing that's used by the Bank of England as the lead indicator of where the jobs market's going. So that talks about the permanent and temporary placements and the recruitment activity that's happened in the month just gone. So it's a really early sign of what's happening. So when you look at the Office for National Statistics data, whenever that comes out, the monthly data, it's talking about the quarter before. But recruiters know what's happened just now. They know literally just now. So it's really important that Treasury have access to that and Bank of England have access to that, because these things, one of the things that they're thinking about, what are they going to do about interest rates given where inflation is? And yes, it's settling back down again. But actually, one of the things that gives businesses a bit more confidence and a bit more leeway is if those interest rates can start to settle back. So using the data, we go into government, we talk to them about what's happening, and we're trying to explain the big structural issues that are happening in the jobs market. So I've already said about economic inactivity levels. Why is it that we have fewer people in the workforce since the pandemic? What's causing that? Why do people over the age of 50, in increasing numbers, why were they opting out of the jobs market coming out of the pandemic? What was behind that? How do we think about the issues with the NHS waiting lists? Because they're telling us that one of the things that's happening is that there's high numbers of people who are waiting for treatment, and actually link it all the way back to recruitment again. So there's two sides to that, not just their candidate pool, the staffing solutions in the NHS. Recruiters understand some of those staffing solutions. You can see where procurement and frameworks have got in the way of doing these things well. So a lot of our work is talking to government about how to do those things better on behalf of the whole industry.
Let's get Gordon into the conversation. So Gordon, if you'd like to give us a little bit of background as to why politics is of interest to you and also what you do in the industry.
Yeah, thank you. So I think, very, very similar to Kate. Obviously, we're working with hundreds of recruitment businesses and we need to get their input into kind of what's happening, certainly within the jobs market across all industries. So we work in perm recruitment businesses, temp recruitment businesses, understanding everything that's going on in there. So from our side, you probably wouldn't find a software company really having that bigger interest in terms of politics. But I think this year, especially with there being a general election later this year, then I think that's playing in a part. We do a survey every single year of all of our customers in terms of their optimism the retention rates, what they're going to be looking at across the business and what they're looking at for the year just gone, but also the year ahead. And I think Kate mentioned it there as well, that the levels have just came back down. So when we did see that big spike during the pandemic, we're back down pretty much at where we were pre-pandemic. So we're not dipped below that, and it's not still above that. It's kind of just back to where it was again. So I think for us, it's just always keeping an eye in terms of what's happening in the market. But certainly this year, we're a general election on the horizon. We always just want to keep our customers abreast in terms of where we think they're going in. And Kate mentioned it as well. Recruiters are working a quarter ahead, and they're not looking back. As soon as that last quarter's gone, it's gone. And they're always looking forward to what's happening next. So.
Yeah, and Firefish software, because you've got all of those recruiters and all of that data, you produce reports, don't you, that help people to understand what's going on. So what's the latest report and what's it saying?
Yeah, so we produce our future recruitment report, our kind of leaders report. So we survey all of our customers at the end of each kind of year, and then we publish the report every January. And what we're looking at and what we're seeing is what they expect from kind of sales growth, and we break that down kind of region by region, sector by sector. We're also then looking at retention rates, so where they feel that their teams are going to grow or going to scale back. And again, we're breaking that down. So some of the things that we're seeing in there is that, for example, Scotland are not as optimistic as the rest of the UK is at the moment. So Scotland, in terms of optimism levels, and again, that's maybe just to do with the politics up there, and it probably doesn't really matter who comes into power, because they don't always get an opportunity to influence the 5 million people in Scotland. Those votes don't always attribute to then who's in power. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see that if Labour do win and they don't get a majority, whether there's hints that the SNP would then form a coalition with Labour. So that might give them a little bit more, but it's probably interesting that Scotland's not showing as much optimism as the rest of the UK. But like I say, that report is going just across all the sectors. Construction as well, they're forecasting more than 50% growth next year across the construction agencies that we've surveyed, and we have seen a little dip in the construction, certainly on that temp side, over the last few months as well. So it's just really interesting to see the different sectors and the different regions and how they are feeling. Now, can't say it's all impacted from politics, and in terms of, but it's just looking at that optimism, knowing what's just happened, because at the end of each year they're all looking at, have we done what we set out to do this year, and how are we feeling? So it is more a gut feel, but it is across 600 kind of industry leaders that we're talking about there. So, but there's a whole raft of other information in that report.
Well, we will share the link to the report, so that'll be in the podcast notes, wherever on YouTube as well. If you're a visual and you would prefer to watch us rather than listen to us, then feel free to subscribe to either of those. Now, we will have people that are listening in from around the world that actually work with the UK. I was recently in India with 100 managers there, and they were really interested in UK politics and what was going on. Of course, they don't necessarily get the ins and out of it. And just something as simple as understanding what the UK actually means. So just to clarify for those that don't live here, and you know what, I think I was in my 20s before I worked it out, or someone told me, the United Kingdom is actually made up of 4 countries: England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. So not Ireland, just Northern Ireland. That you can tell why there were the troubles there, that we took the north of Ireland. Great Britain, which we tend to go with in the Olympics and things like that. You'll see GB a lot everywhere, is just England, Scotland and Wales. And all of these 4 countries have their own parliaments or their own governments. So Kate, do you have any insight into those 4 different governments and how they work together for people that don't know?
Yeah, and it actually picks up on something that Gordon was saying there, that the regional jobs market and the sectoral differences, they cut across each other. So when just to pick up on the Firefish survey, there is that when we look at things like job vacancy posting data last month, actually there was a slight dip in the local authorities and the unitary authorities in Northern Ireland and Scotland, some of those in terms of less hiring activity happening. And those regional indicators are so important to note, because go back to what you were just saying there, Angela, is that those devolved solutions for those labour markets become really important. So what is it that Scottish government, Welsh government, the Northern Irish Assembly should be prioritising, as and when they see it, in terms of thinking about that local labour market and local labour market solutions. And increasingly, we're actually seeing that the devolution agenda is going to be far more important in specific parts of the UK. So one of the developments that's happened in England is you have metro mayors now. And those metro mayors are really leading on the local labour market solutions in and around Manchester, the West Midlands, Sheffield. They take a central place in bringing together the different stakeholders. So if you're going to get the jobs market right, you need to bring together employers and the education system. And we don't do it brilliantly. And we really don't do it brilliantly if you try and make it so it's universal. So if you had a solution that covers the entire UK, then it's often the wrong solution, because we all know about what's happening in Port Talbot and in Wales right now, where there's been a really strong presence of previously a mining community, a steel community. That type of industry has dominated the jobs market. So the solutions there have to be fit for purpose for that jobs market. Recruiters getting involved in those local solutions, they have a wealth of information that the policymakers can really use. They can see exactly what clients are thinking about. They can see where the tensions are, what's causing them to hold back. They can see where the education system, so the colleges, universities locally, aren't preparing people well enough, particularly young people coming into the jobs market. Well, how do you bridge that disconnect? Recruiters can be so important to that. So it's a massive message for us that actually you do need to think about, and skills. So how do you address that connection between the education employment issues is devolved. So Scotland has responsibility for their skills policy. Wales has the same, Northern Ireland. It becomes really important. And that's why you've got to be thinking about, well, this is one of the angles for us, is to think about how do you influence politics in those local areas. And every single MP that will be standing in the general election at some point this year, the most important people to them are their local constituents. So the people voting for them, because that's how our system works. So understanding that local jobs market, they'll want to know what's happening in terms of recruitment, and the local MPs become a really, really important channel at this point in time as they start to gear towards a general election. Regardless of the devolution system across the UK, that becomes super important. Knowing your local MP, trying to figure out what's interesting to them and how they will support your business, because they'll be interested in those votes back.
Now, I would never have considered that when I was a recruit. Admittedly, probably wasn't that into politics at that point. So we are hoping through our podcast that we're going to get people more interested in that, because straight away I'm thinking, I would want to contact my local MP. I would want to go and have a meeting with them. I want to talk about these things. And like you say, how to support the business. And this is the time to do it. They are going to be all ears listening to their constituents because of the election coming up. So I think it's perfect timing. So thank you for pointing that out. So recruiters out there, get this on your agenda and get those meetings, because you can help to support where the industry is going to go, and you can have an influence in your local area. Recruiting in a certain area, you might be abroad, but you're very focused, maybe say on Port Talbot and supporting that. Then again, still get in contact with them and try and have conversations with them. See from there. What are your thoughts on that, Gordon?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a strange one, isn't it? Because we've got Westminster, we've got the UK government, but then there's such devolved powers, and the likes of Scotland probably being the second largest to them, where even down to their own tax rates, where they can actually set their own tax rates down. In Scotland, with there's 6 tax levels, whereas in the rest of the UK, I believe, or in England, there's only the 3, and the higher rate tax in Scotland is 65% as well. So again, I think from a business point of view, then it's when you're setting up a business, and look, we know there's thousands of recruitment businesses set up every single year. They don't all go on to grow to big, but there's thousands of new businesses set up every year. So I think even with those things in terms of community consideration, with when you are setting that business up, we can see again from our report that there's been a shift in people who went back after the pandemic to the kind of hybrid model, there's been an actual shift that's went from 14% to 30% in terms of people now going fully remote. So there's definitely been another shift in that remote working. So when we're now moving to a world where people can just go and set up anywhere, they don't need to be specifically in one area, then again, I think a lot of these things in terms of the tax, and again in Scotland, I think there's, I know I'm talking about Scotland a lot, I've actually lived in England for the last 13 years, but in terms of up there as well, there is this feel that probably the same that's happened with the Conservatives right now, which is they've been in power a long time, and it's the same with the SNP, they've been in there now 13 years, and it's like, is it starting to get a little bit stagnant? Are they getting a little bit careless? And is there going to be a big enough change? But I definitely think from a business perspective, it's and from a regional perspective, it's not just the 4 countries that make up the UK. A lot of these countries, Wales, Northern Ireland, Scotland, have got real strong devolved powers that allow them to really operate as individual companies, set their own tax rates, etc. So I think that shouldn't be kind of lost on anyone that, yes, this is a UK general election, but it's not always going to impact all four corners of it, if that makes sense.
Definitely. I'm learning stuff already, which is why I want to do these, bring people in with this knowledge, because we want to bring this to recruiters. We want to give them the opportunity. We'll do the heavy lifting, we'll do the analysis, we'll grab the reports, give you all the links to have conversations with your customers, whether that's clients or candidates, but certainly in your teams as well, as to what impact is this going to have on your business. And start having the conversations now. I'm gobsmacked that there's 70 countries out of the 195 locations that are having general election this year.
The UK is just one of the 70 odd countries that is holding a general election likely this year. So the latest it could possibly be is January 2025, but all the bookies are betting on it being this autumn. And obviously, one of the things that we've witnessed, particularly since the pandemic, has been how important the labour market has been for those really significant issues. If you want economic growth, then it's about how do you have the right people in the right jobs in the right places. And we've seen that demand for recruitment services, it went through the roof as we came out of the lockdowns in 2021, 22, and it settled back down a bit now. But there's been real remarkable resilience in the labour market. And the big structural issues that we're facing as an economy. So what's happening with productivity and how does the UK compare to our international competitors? How do businesses grow and develop? How do we get more people into work when we have a growing level of economic inactivity? It's been one of the features since the pandemic that we have fewer people in the labour market, and there's deep structural issues within our jobs market and our demography that's changing. So these things all come back to understanding the jobs market. And who better to understand that than recruiters? Recruiters are there on the front line. They understand what their clients are doing in terms of their hiring intentions. They understand the pauses that they might be making because of that lack of confidence in the overall economic picture. And they really understand their candidate pool. And candidates have been changing quite rapidly. So the politics and whoever the future government is and whichever party that is, they will need to be thinking deeply about what do they do about the labour market. So this week we've published a manifesto that sets out how policymakers can understand that jobs market and the value that we can bring as a recruitment industry. And we pay particular attention to the different forms of work that are in the jobs market now. So just around half of us don't work in a permanent 9-to-5 way anymore in the UK. So that's significant. And recruiters are that channel for that contingent, agile labour force. And you've really got to understand that if the political parties are going to regulate that labour market in the right way and allow people to work the way they want to work. So just to set the scene, the politics of the pestle, it really matters because it's the thing that unlocks a number of the other features, particularly that economic piece.
So why should they be listening to recruiters?
it's just fundamental, isn't it? So in my, I've been at the REC for over 10 years now. In my time, I have never known the labour market to be so front and centre in everything that's going on. And so I've mentioned about how the Bank of England, they monitor really closely what's happening in the jobs market. They look at our data. We can see the comparison of how they're using it and benching it as a really strong indicator of what's happening in the jobs market. They're looking at what's happening with wage inflation in particular and pay rates. And recruiters have fabulous information there about starting salaries, hourly pay rates that we put together every month. They use that to really clearly inform their decisions about what to do to monitor and to reduce as steady as possible inflation by their lever is the interest rates. So then you've got a chancellor right now who's talking about how does he use his budget on the 6th of March to encourage growth in the economy, and what tax can he give to us as individuals and voters is what they're particularly interested in. What impact does that have on the economy overall? How do you free up business to make more investment? And to be quite honest, businesses aren't necessarily great at investing in themselves, and they're particularly not great at thinking about the deep structural issues that cause growth, and that's workforce planning, the stuff that doesn't sound really exciting or interesting, but actually is fundamental, because how we all work and how productive we are in our jobs, in our workplaces, is the things that gives you the growth. And then it allows for elements like social mobility. How are people moving on in their lives? How are they developing themselves? How are they supporting their families? How are they giving back to their communities? A lot of it comes from how we work and the income that we make and the taxes we then pay on that. So it's all interlinked. It's super important to governments. And one of the things that we find is that they want to know a couple of different things. So the politics right now is you've got a government that's in a race against time before the general election, so they want to do things quickly. They want to. We've been a group of our members and myself. We were in a couple of meetings with the Minister for Employment recently. She wants to know the quick wins. She wants to know the things that she can do that tangibly make a difference to local jobs markets to get more people into work. That's her job. She wants to know how she can support and help that, and she wants the ideas from recruiters. You'll have. Gordon's right. There'll be a change in governments. There will be a change in power. That's the one thing that people are banking on. What it looks like, I mean, most of the polls say it's skewed towards Labour. Labour have huge ideas. They've been waiting for a long time to be in government again. They are talking about some quite radical, fundamental things. One of their proposals, which we've strongly pushed back against, was about having a single status of worker. So that turns on its head what we've been doing for a long, long time. So yes, you can. So you can be an employee, you could be a worker, you could be self-employed, and there's a lot of back and forth about who's covered under that. So we know all the debate about gig workers and whether they're truly self-employed or not. And you think about freelancers and contractors and interims and the temporary agency workers. There's some really established rules around this that we don't want to see turned on their head. There's a big part of the Labour Party that wants to think about how it does change some of this, and it's our job to try and influence that. They've come out with a statement which is if we were to be elected and become a government, we'd ban 0 hours contracts. How? Why? What's the problem with a 0 hours contract if it works for everybody? It's not necessarily just okay to think of it as a really a bland thing where a 0 hours contract is exploitative. 0 hours contracts have already been outlawed in many ways, but what we want to see is a really sensible conversation. So I said that people are working in very different ways now. They don't necessarily do the traditional 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. I don't think that's how most of us work, to be entirely honest, anymore. But if there's so many of us not working that way, we've got to make sure the regulatory environment is fit for purpose, and recruiters have to be front and centre of informing that, because they see why people choose to work the way they do. It's got to be important that we share that voice.
Definitely. So this is the type of thing that we want recruiters to take away from this, utilising their voice and having these conversations. So whether it's you're speaking to a client and you supply them a lot of temporary workers, I'm thinking at one point I had 1,500 temps out per day with my team, and having that conversation with the client and saying, if Labour gets in and if their policy with regards to 0-hour contracts does actually come into force, and if this is what they're doing, what impact would it have on your business? And getting them to start those conversations and being a true consultant to your clients, to be looking out for them, giving them the heads up, what might be coming in, what could be the difference, what can we do about it now? And lobbying, obviously, your local MPs would be fantastic, and having those conversations, because I've got flashback for 18 years ago when the temp was considered, it was a derogatory term, and it was something that people wouldn't want to be. The governments of the time were like, well, no one wants to be a temp. Yes, they do. We know that in the recruitment industry. People love the flexibility. If they're a real socialite, they love going to different companies all the time. I loved it. Well, I was doing my A-levels, I was a temp, and every week somewhere different, new people, new skills I was learning. It was fantastic for my growth at that period of time. And there's lots of people for lots of different reasons that would choose to have temporary work and 0-hour contracts, and that works really well for them. So to take that away from them without even having a discussion, I'm off on it already. From there, it really gets my goat that they see that as a negative, because there's so many positives to it. Gordon, what are you thinking?
Do you know what? You said you had a flashback. I'm the exact same there. And I think it's made me think about, we talk about the size of the recruitment market in the UK, and it's the billions, 30 billion, 40 billion in terms of the overall size of it. But I've built a career not being in recruitment, but I'm in recruitment. So when Kate was talking there, I spent 10 years working in the umbrella world. And one of the reasons I left that was because of every pre-budget statement, it was just dread. It was what's going to come next, because it was just change after change. And then what's happening this year, again, potentially, probably will happen, another change in government. Did they throw out everything that the previous administration have been doing in terms of changing that and change radically to something else? So, I mean, I spent 10 years basically speaking to business leaders in terms of recruitment and consultants, and having that knowledge to be able to have those conversations with the clients and that understanding of the IR35 legislation, all the different types of workers and everything else. So it's just, you forget that the recruitment sector isn't just the agencies, it's tech firms like where I've built my career in terms of the last 10, 12 years now. In the software side, you've got the umbrella, the payroll side, you've got the solicitors, the insurance, all of these facets that make up the whole recruitment, and we're all going in the same direction, and we're all having to try and stay abreast of everything that's happened across the whole kind of industry, everything that's changing. So it just gave me a little flashback there in terms of the changes that potentially are going to come for those, not just for the individual workers themselves, but for the businesses, and then having to liaise with the clients and make sure that everything that you're doing is compliant, above board, done properly. And it's just, it's a whole world of pain.
Well, the key of a PESTLE analysis is that you're ahead of the game. You're looking forwards the next 3, 6, 12 months as to what might be coming your way that can make a difference. And obviously then you can have a plan for it, but you may be even able to influence it, as we've already realised through this discussion. Now, talking about having conversations and having that influence, I did want to bring up, because this threw me, I used to be the co-chair of the Recruitment Society, and the gentleman that was the other co-chair, Adrian Thomas, actually worked in Whitehall, and he was responsible for the recruitment. And we used to put events on, and I remember doing it in Churchill's actual room where he stood on the balcony and looked out. It was amazing. But we booked one, and a general election was called. And all of a sudden, everything was very difficult. And everything was in. Now, this term is called purdah. isn't it? And it does have an impact. We'll put the link in there. Have I actually got the definition? Let's have a look. So purdah is, so it's once an election's been announced, there's a block on a lot of communications and things can't be changed. So it's PURDAH. We'll put the link in there for people to do a bit more research on this. But Kate, what's the immediate impact for recruiters when purdah happens?
Yeah, on a day-to-day basis, it shouldn't impact how any business is operating and running, because so the rules continue, the regulations continue, the legal basis is all there. REC is still there, Firefish is still there. We're all here, right? We're still doing what we're doing and providing the advice.
I'm thinking more of the companies that are dealing with government, that are actually
absolutely
government. Yeah.
So what it means is it's to allow there to be a fair shot, basically, so that the government that's in power doesn't do something that's really advantageous to them politically, and changes something to the detriment of the political party that's trying to get be elected. So that's what it's there to do. And you're right about the suppliers to the public sector. So one of the things, and we face it as well, one of the things that happens is there'll be a really cautious approach by the civil servants to talking to any supplier and to any body like the REC. We'll continue to talk to them about day-to-day developments, so enforcement, etc., things like that. But civil servants won't necessarily be in a position to talk to their recruiter supplier about a particular contract. They won't be able to guarantee that a certain bit of hiring is going to be happening necessarily. Frameworks continue, so often those are already fully in place. But if there's something where you're working perhaps outside of a framework, or you're waiting for sign-off for something, they probably won't give it during those 6 weeks. That's the key. And you just have to allow them that little bit of latitude, that they won't make any big calls, any big decisions, which they might have normally had signed off at a ministerial level somewhere. So day-to-day operations should be fine. But anything that feels like a big call, they might be very cautious about talking to you. And they certainly won't want to be giving information that may sound political. Yeah. So that's the thing of not hosting meetings comes up, is that you might be saying, oh, shall I come round for a coffee? Shall I do X, Y, and Z? And actually the civil servants go, actually, I'm not sure if that's within the rules right now. So no, but we will do it once everything's settled. And so, so 6 weeks, it all does settle back again. And like I say, you find that there's this big run up to an election where the outgoing government tries to do loads of stuff, and then there's the bit where the new government comes in and they're full of excitement and enthusiasm and lots happens all at once. So it's a little lull in those proceedings in some ways.
So it's giving them a break. I must admit, this is where it's such a big difference, isn't it, between the US elections and the UK elections. So 6 weeks for us, that's it. We call an election, 6 weeks later, it's decided. It's not down to the individual. It's all about the party that you actually go for. Whereas we've got 2 years worth of them trying to actually get you to convince to vote for someone. I am sure come July, we'll be doing a lot on the US and theirs, but we've got 70 different companies. So we'll be looking back on some of those countries as to what's happened in those elections and looking forward to what's coming. And I know Neil Carberry, head of the REC there, he put his hat on October the 17th. And I've seen quite a few things this week that are suggesting October. So maybe he's going to be right on that. And it's going to be a close one. But it still seems...
Anybody think he'd been doing it a long time?
Yeah.
He definitely has. He definitely has. Okay. So with regards to our industry and the fact that we are like depending on the numbers that you look at, 35-40 billion pound industry here in the UK, we have a huge impact on GDP, gross domestic product, and obviously the politicians are sort of kept to that, and they're always looking at, and our GDP has been really dull for quite a period of time, isn't it? I look back and I think it was July 2021 We've literally just been up, down, up, down, up, down by just a little bit. We're not growing at all, are we? So what implication does that have on our industry if the country isn't growing in any way, shape or form either? Gordon?
I was going to let Kate go first on that one, given.
Go for it, Kate.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I mean, you'll know it, you'll feel it on a day-to-day basis, won't we? As business owners, business leaders, they'll feel what it's like. It's tough, right? It's been a tough environment to function in. Is one of the phrases that is used is that we're in this phase of permacrisis where you leap from one thing to the next. So nobody quite expected the pandemic to take the form and shape it did, and to be as fundamental to the change we've seen in work. So Gordon's already mentioned about how it's affected hybrid and remote working options and people taking different choices about how they choose to work. And then you leap into the global situation and the international conflicts, really, really tough stuff. And it's affecting imports and exports now. And then the cost of living crisis, permacrisis is the way that it's being described. So the overall economy has been really sluggish. And yet the growth, 0.3%, I think, and then it's predicted the maximum. It's predicted it doesn't even hit a 1% growth until 2025 is what most of the economists are predicting at the minute. And our data for the recruitment market shows really steady as you go stuff. So we go with the figure that it has a contribution. Recruitment has a contribution of over £40 billion per year, caused by the fact that on any given day, there are 1 million people working as a temporary agency worker, a contractor or a freelancer via a recruiter in this country, and made close to 1 million permanent job placements last year. Massive, significant contributor. And one of the things that is particularly interesting to government about that growth agenda is that UK recruitment is seen as a bit of a world leader, and therefore is a really good export potential. So we're mainly a services-based economy in the UK. Recruitment as a professional service, the size of it makes it actually bigger than the legal profession and accountancy in those GDP terms. And because the reputation as a consultative service of UK recruitment is so good, really interested conversations from government, from Department for International Trade about how do you build, so it's Department for Business and Trade now, isn't it? Is how do you build that UK recruitment as a proper export to other countries? And a bit like you were saying, Angela, about how you've been in consultation with organisations and your trip to India, we've had a couple of delegations come to us because they're very interested from overseas in how do they invest in UK businesses for the export opportunity. So part and parcel of this piece of GDP, how do you grow GDP? One of it's through really thinking about those export opportunities and the international development opportunities that might be afforded to recruitment.
Yeah, wherever I go around the world, people are always interested and always asking what's happening in the UK recruitment market, what are you doing? And certainly when I first went to sort of the Far East, they considered us about 15 years ahead of where they were. They were always looking at bringing things in that we'd been doing 15 years before. So it makes you feel good. So that's something, again, if you are a UK recruiter, to feel good about that. And yeah, what shocked me is we're bigger than the steel and the fashion industry combined. So when you start seeing those type of numbers, it really frustrates me that we don't get the recognition for the industry that we are. Unfortunately, we're not always seen as that professional industry. And if we can do things to make it different and have conversations like this to help move things forward. One thing I wanted to reference, and I wonder if it will happen again, certainly when we had the GFC, the global financial crisis, 2008 to 10, 11, some countries, what got us out of it here in the UK, and we were top of the G7, so those 7 countries, we came out of it fastest, was the Growth Accelerator Programme that the government brought in. And it's these type of things that can make a difference. So if you were a true SME, so under 249 staff and under 40 million turnover, then you could get access to a coach like myself, so I was part of it for a few years, for 6 days of my time. The government paid for 6 days of my time to work with companies, SMEs, to double their revenue. So whether it was turnover, profit, or staff, you had to commit to one of those in 3-year period. So that made a real difference to those. And 96% of the 27,000 companies that went through it hit that target. And recruiters could do all three because they can grow staff turnover and their profit very quickly if they get that incentive to do so, and the support and the guidance. So I'm looking for our next government to create, and it might even be earlier in the year, you never know, those quick wins. Conservatives may look back on that and realise how successful that was at moving things forward when it all got stagnant. So yeah, let's shout about that a little bit more.
And Angela, on that, I think, so we're having a lot of conversations with the political parties, but Labour in particular, because of where the polls are heading. And, and there's a piece for us of trying to explain the jobs market, explain why people choose to work the way they do, and I've already gone through that. But the other part of it is they're looking for ideas on how do they encourage growth. That they are absolutely keen to hear from businesses, and we've been fortunate enough to talk to them. They're having a review into that business engagement side through a guy called Ian Anderson, who's been fabulous in talking to us about what are our ideas for that, because they see recruitment is a growth industry and it's got lots of potential. So one of the things that I think we're really, really good at as a sector is we provide them with that institutional memory. So you talking about the Growth Accelerator, I have a memory of the partnership we had with DWP coming out of the financial crash, which was about, so actually unemployment rates did go up. These highly skilled people were being made redundant out of financial services and a number of other sectors. Who's good at getting them back into the jobs market? Recruiters are really good at that. Job centres got a job to do in terms of explaining the benefit system, explaining what you need to do around your tax implications potentially, if that's important. But really, like, what's my benefit situation? What do I need to do there? Recruiters explain how do you get into work, given that some of these people hadn't necessarily been looking for a job for many, many years. And that partnership was fantastic because fastest returns were the ones via the recruiters. The stuff we're doing with DWP at the minute is Restart, which is all about how do you support people who are longer term unemployed back into the labour market. Oh, I tell you what, give them some chances to build their confidence, build their skill sets through temporary work. Recruiters are really good at that. So some of these partnerships are so important, but we provide the memory, don't we? This happened before, it was successful for these reasons. Oh, and it could be even better if you listen to how it worked before.
Brilliant. I think that's a great way to sum up this whole session. Thank you for being my first guests on Hiring Happenings. Hiring News brought to you every month with a pestle twist. We've done politics on session 1 with Gordon Webb from Firefish Software and Kate Shoesmith from the REC. Now go put it all to work, everyone, because we know the recruitment industry can have a huge impact on how we do over this next couple of years. Let's make it a good one. Thank you, everyone.
Hiring Happenings is the new podcast from Recruiting Gym, bringing you hiring news every month with a pestle twist.
Sponsored by Monster.